Hey everybody, this is Kevin and welcome back to the next build video in my build video series on Estes rockets. And today we finally get to start my long-awaited Saturn V project. I've had this for a bit of time, but other projects kept coming up and were higher in the priority list, so I never got around to getting to this one. But now today is the day. We finally get to start it. This is the latest version of their Saturn V. As you know, over the years, and I would even say decades, they've always had a Saturn V, and they've continually improved upon them, made some advanced modifications, making them a little bit more realistic, more scale looking, and this is no exception. This is their all-new 1/100th scale. This one does fly on the F motors, which is good, because I know in the past some of them were maybe considered a little underpowered, but now they've finally reached to where they get the appropriate power setting in there. So again, on an F motor, this thing is going to be dynamite. So let's go ahead and get the box open. The box is bigger than I can fit on the screen, so I'm kind of doing my best here. But let's go ahead and lift the lid off. Good tight fit. You get that air suction going here too. That doesn't want to release. Okay, there we go. Get the lid off, and then we can finally get to the contents, which is the most important parts of this kit. We got a whole slew of stuff here. A lot of big items. Got some big tubes here. We got some long tubes. We got some transition pieces, but first and foremost, I'm digging in for the manual. There we go. So let me get to the manual, because like we do in all builds, we first have to do an inventory and make sure we have everything accounted for. That's probably one of the thicker catalogs or manuals I've encountered. Highly detailed. But wow, that's going to be quite the inventory. So without any further ado, I'm just going to place this up in the top right corner here, and we're going to get started on inventorying all the items. Okay, this is actually going to be just the first of a few inventories that we need to get through. And I've broken it up by the different inventory pages, but you can see we're starting out with the transition piece. This is the LEM shroud. We have the third stage body tube. We have a spacer ring. Now this is for the display nozzles. This won't be for flight, but this will be required for mounting and displaying the rocket. We've got the LEM, the Lunar Excursion module piece. We've got the main body tube. This is the massive, I believe it's at least 3.5, maybe 4. Yeah, it's a 4-inch tube. Massive. So we got one of those. We've got the engine mount tube. We've got our 2 reinforcing rings. Well, I should say 1 reinforcing ring. And 1 main body coupler. Very similar, but the coupler is wider than the ring. We've got our aramid, which is similar to Kevlar cord. We've got 3, and I'm not going to open up the package, but we've got 3 sets of shock cords in here. We've got our engine retainer, 2-part, the glue-on adapter, and the cap. We've got 3 parachutes. We've got 3 of the tape discs, which will hold the shroud lines onto the parachute. And we've got the shroud lines themselves. 3 of those, 1 for each parachute. And last but not least, on this sheet, we've got 4 bags of clay. This rocket's going to require a lot of nose weight. Okay, so that wraps up inventory number 1. Let's get on to the next one. Okay, the next inventory we're going to do now is the cardstock parts. These are the same parts that are found in the same bag that the manual is located in. So first off, we want to find our centering rings. These are for the main body tube. Then we've got another set of centering rings, but these are the ones that will house the engine mount. Then we've got this printed cardstock that has a shroud for the 3rd stage, and it's also got the 2 shock cord mounts for our mounting our parachutes and shock cord assembly. Then we've got the fin assembly parts. And last but not least, in this inventory, we've got the templates for the painting of the rocket itself. And more than likely, I'm going to photocopy these and use the photocopies. That way I'll have the originals intact in case something were to happen to the template when I'm applying it or working with it. If I need to print up a new one, I've got the original to go from. So that's the plan on that one. That takes care of our cardstock items. Let's move on to the next inventory. Okay, next up we've got our vacuum formed parts. We've got our 4 fairings, and you can see the warping in the plastic. Don't be concerned about that. Those will obviously disappear when we cut these out and apply them to the body tube. So we've got 4 very nicely formed fairings. Okay, here we've got our 3rd stage wrap. Same thing, the little warping you see will disappear when it folds up. Here we've got our 2nd stage wrap. Very nice detailed grooves and raceways embedded in the plastic there. And then here we've got our upper 2nd stage wrap. Okay, here we've got our inner tank wrap. And then we've got our 1st stage wrap. And last but not least, we've got our reduction wrap. Okay, very nicely molded. I see no errors in the vacuum forming of these parts at all, so we are good to go. Okay, last but not least, we've got the plastic parts as well as the decals. So first off, we're going to look at this small little parts bag here. This has a little plastic part set. It's got our RCS nozzles and motors, and looks like part of the tower assembly. So, and also the tower. Yeah, the 2 tower pieces are in there. Then we've got the actual Apollo capsule itself. Little conical nose piece there. And the bag also includes this little disc here that looks like it would mount to the bottom of the capsule, but as you can see in the inventory, this piece is not needed. So you get it, but you don't need it. Then also in this same bag we have what looks like a launch lug, but what they do is they incorporate it into being the escape motor body. So this will be the very tip of the nose cone. Okay. Then moving on to this long skinny bag, we've got 3 half-round tunnels. Now be careful not to lose these items. These are tiny and can easily disappear, but you have a brass wire. They do include a snap swivel. And they also include an engine hook, which you're probably wondering, well, why do they give you an engine hook? Because the motor is held in with the retainer cap system. But then you find this little supplement that is found in the box, and it says included engine hook is not needed. So I'm sure some people were confused as to why they got it. So they very efficiently included this little note and supplement saying you get one, but you don't need it, which is actually a nice thing to have if you ever want to do custom building in the future. Now you've got yourself an engine hook. So we've got those. We have 2 launch lugs. Looks like they'll mount on 1/4-inch rods. And these have the curvature built in, so these will glue onto the side of the body. And then we've got 4 fins. Now I'm not going to take these out of the bag, but we do have the 4 sets, which means 8 total. I'm sorry, I'm miscounting these. There's 8 fins in here, but they glue together making 4 total fins. So hopefully that all made sense. Okay, and then we've got 2 sets of decals. A smaller set, looks like these are what's going to be mounted onto the Apollo command module. And then we've got our larger set here, which has all of our American flag and USA decals. Those are stunning in person, wow. Very impressive, very impressive. So, okay, well that wraps up the inventory. We can now clear the board and we can start assembly on the all-new Estes Rockets Saturn V. Okay, the first step in building the Saturn V is marking the body tubes as what will become reference points for future steps. Because it's so large, I couldn't fit this on camera, so I went ahead and did the main body tube off camera. It's just so big I couldn't fit it on here. But anyway, so I got that marked. But we do have the smaller one that I can show you. I'm going to use my Estes tube marking guide. And I'm just going to line it up there in the guide. Take my pencil and just draw a single line. Now you might notice a little bit of color on my tubes, and as you know, if you've seen any of my previous builds, in fact I did a build on a video on how to do this, but I filled in the spiral lines already using primer and lacquer thinner. It's a pretty quick and effective way to fill in the spiral lines on your body tube, so check that video out if you don't already know about it. So I did that off camera, and I marked this off camera, and I just did this one. Now, down to the nitty-gritty, we need to make some markings on our body tube. So we need to mark some reference lines. We need to make, let me see, I want to make, let's make this the bottom. We'll make this the bottom end. I need to measure up from this end 18 3/8 inches, which is great because this ruler only goes 18 inches, but what I'll do is I'll mark it at 18 and just add a little bit to it. So, okay, so we'll mark here at the 18-inch mark, and then we want to go an additional 3/8 of an inch. So we'll just make a, I'm sorry, I'm doing that off camera. I'll slide that back into frame. Okay, make my notch and go 3/8 of an inch. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let me make a significant mark there. I am also going to, before I forget, I want to mark R down here for rear, so I know. We also want to do 8 7/16 from the bottom. 8 7/16. So that's going to put us right at here. Okay, and then our final mark is we want to make a mark at exactly 3 inches up. So 3 inches right here. Okay, so 3, 8 7/16, and 18 3/8 right there. Okay, and now we're going to take this smaller body tube and we're going to make some marks on it as well. And they show, not referencing the rear, but from the front. So I'm going to mark F for front. And we want to measure, let's see, 3/8 of an inch down. Just one simple marking, 3/8 of an inch. Right there. Let me turn it around this way. Okay, so there's our mark. Okay, so the body tubes are now marked. We can now proceed to assembling our engine mount. Before we start cutting and gluing, we do need to make some marks. You'll notice here I've got some JB Weld pre-mixed. We'll get to that here in a bit. In fact, let me set it off to the side so we don't make a mess. But we want to take our long engine tube and we want to make 2 marks on it. One we want to make at 8 1/8 inches from one end. So let me mark that. Let me measure 8 1/8 from this end here. That puts us right there, and also 1/8 from the end. So right there. Okay, so those are 2 marks. The third mark for our third centering ring is going to be measured by where the engine cap glues on. So that'll determine where that goes. So let me go ahead now and cut out. These probably should, yeah, they just punch out. Nice clean laser cut centering rings through the cardstock. Okay. And also we want to punch out these center holes. I thought I was going to need the knife, but I don't. That's nice. There we go. Okay, let's do some dry fitting first and see if we need to sand out at all. No, it doesn't look like we need to. They're not, oh, you can hear the squeak. They're not loose, but they are tight, but that's okay. Let me get this one on as well. In fact, let me get them all started on from one end here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to take our lines, which I think I actually might have lost my line. Let me remark this. At the 1/8 inch. Okay, we want to put the glue around the perimeter and push the ring through the glue and onto our mark. So I'll do that real quick. Okay, notice I put the glue all on the inside of that mark, and we're going to push the ring through the glue to our mark and let it sit right there, and then I'll kind of smooth that out and making a fillet. Okay, always have a paper towel available, and we'll do the same thing for our middle ring. And we'll just push that up to our mark. There. And we'll fillet that out as well. And in fact, we'll use that same glue and make a fillet on this side. A little bit more. Okay, and we can go ahead and draw a fillet around the forward end as well. All right. Okay, now that takes care of the front too. Now the rear is a little bit different. We're actually going to apply our JB weld to the ring and slide our cap onto that. And before we do, we want to take some sandpaper. This is just 220, and I'm just going to scuff up the plastic just a little bit so the glue adheres a little bit better. Now normally, if you've seen any of my previous builds, you know that I prefer to wait on gluing on the engine retainer until the end of the build, because that way you don't have to worry about masking it or anything during the painting process. However, this rocket is built in such a way that when this is installed up into the tube, it's very deep and hard to get to, and it's actually out of the way of the painting process. So this is not going to be a problem at all by installing it ahead of time. Okay, so now I'm going to take my JB weld that I pre-mixed earlier. And we're going to apply it to the tube, not the ring, but the tube. And I am going a little bit further down than it normally would for the cap, but the thing is I'm going to run the centering ring up through the JB weld, and that's what I want to use to hold it in place also. Okay, so there is our JB weld. Going to apply the retainer, twisting it as I go. Okay, now I'm going to drive the centering ring down. In fact, I'm going to apply just a little bit more. So I'm going to actually use a toothpick for this because I don't want to make too big a mess. The instructions call for epoxy, and JB Weld is an epoxy, but however it is more heat resistant than standard epoxy, and since this is going to be arguably one of the hottest areas on board the rocket, I want to keep some strength in this area. Okay, so now I'm going to drive this down. I know it's not able to see it on camera, but it's going to drive this down to the centering ring. I'm sorry, to the retainer. There. You can see it's now flush, and it actually oozed out some of the JB weld, which is good. I can go around that now with a Q-tip. Doused with some rubbing alcohol, and just kind of help clean up that fillet. There we go. We get a dry Q-tip and just kind of clean up some of that. There we go. And then now on this side, I'm actually just going to go with some wood glue just to help create a fillet on this end. There we go. And that takes care of our engine mount. It's a long one, so make sure you got plenty of space on your workbench, but that's looking really good. Yes, there's a little bit of a warp to the cardboard, but that's okay, because once it gets pushed into the tube, things will straighten themselves out, and we'll get strong adhesion to the inside tube. So, all right, we're good to go. We're just gonna let that sit and dry. Because of the JB Weld, I do wanna leave this to dry for quite a bit longer, because it'll take probably overnight as compared to just a couple hours for the wood glue. Okay, so that wraps up the engine mount assembly. Okay, now that the motor tube has completely dried, you can see the fillets have kind of turned that hazy yellow color. That tells you the wood glue's pretty much done. And the JB weld is permanently secured. We've got a good solid joint there. So the next thing to do is to glue this into the aft end, or as I've indicated, R for rear end of the main body tube. Just do a dry fit, and you can see that this does fit all the way in. And the next thing you want to do is glue that in with the bottom ring being at 3 3/8 of an inch. Now I took a popsicle stick and I marked 3 3/8 of an inch from the end. So when I glue this in, I can just push this in to that mark, and then I know I'm at the right depth. Okay, so now they don't talk about putting any glue on the inside prior to inserting the mount, but I'm going to, at least for the middle ring, because with the middle ring, then we can at least have that secure and hold position while we then run our fillets, gluing the upper and lower rings in. Okay, so let me grab my bottle of wood glue here, and I'm just going to just kind of run a somewhat of a generic beaded glue around the inside there. Okay, I don't think, whoops, you can almost kind of see it there in the, let me bring it in this way. Ever so lightly, you can see it there at the bottom. But we don't want this to set up too soon, so we want to get going on this. So let me insert our ring, set our next ring, and our third ring. And again, I'm going to push it up to that point on the popsicle stick. Right to there. Okay. Now I'm going to squeeze just so we don't get any movement. And I'm going to, it's going to be hard to show, but I'm going to run a fillet all the way around the perimeter of that ring. There. And you can take your finger and kind of smooth that out if you want. Again, just be careful that you don't allow the ring or the motor tube to shift fore or aft on you. You want to maintain it same position. Okay, that looks really good. Okay, now I'm going to take the tube, rotate it around. You can kind of feel where the centering ring is, and I feel it right here, so I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure. And now I'm going to install a fillet on the forward centering ring. Again, this is one of those processes I wish I could get a better camera angle. Okay, let's see if I got enough glue in there to run a fillet. Yeah. Okay. Okay, you can kind of, well, let's see if I can angle it again. You can kind of see our fillet down in there. Nice. Now, just for safety's sake, let's confirm that we're still at the 3 3/8 inch mark. There. Stopped right there. Perfect. Okay, so now we're just going to let that sit and dry for a little bit until we're ready to glue in our retainer ring. Okay? Okay, now that the engine mount is dry inside the body tube, it's time to install this 1-inch retaining ring. However, I did encounter something that I think a lot of builders of the Saturn V have encountered, at least in the earlier prototyped model kits. The retainer ring is just a little bit too big to fit inside. In fact, we're talking a good millimeter beyond the diameter. So the only way to get this to fit is to slice this, or in my case, I'm going to cut it, and we're going to trim off just a hair. In fact, you can test it if you want. After you cut it, roll it up like that, lay it inside your tube. That's going to be really hard to show. Let me rotate it this way. And then see how much overlap you've got. And we're talking less than a millimeter, actually. We're talking just a hair. But that's enough to prevent it from going in. So I'm going to have to trim off ever so slightly the very edge of this ring. There, that's just a hair. That may not be enough, but we can always trim it again if need be. That's going to do it. All right. So now, also, I took the same popsicle stick that I measured earlier for our 3 3/8, and I've now marked a location of 3 3/4. Now, I am going to have to, actually, you know what I was going to say? Instead of, we're not going to slide it in now because I've cut it. I can actually expand it out. So we can measure, just to get a kind of a rough estimate, where it's going to be until I do the final gluing. But we can just make a few marks at that 3/4 inch mark. There. Okay. So now we're going to take our wood glue and we're going to run a bead of glue on the inside end of those marks. And I'm going to take my finger and spread it out. Okay. Okay, we take our ring. I'm going to initially kind of close it in on itself, lay it down in there, and then release it and it'll open up and expand. And then we can set it along those notch marks that we made. And then we want to align the joint. Okay, and I'm going to press this in to get our 3/4 inch position all the way around. Okay, there we have it, 3/4 inch. Kind of clean that area up in there, wipe off that residual glue. And on the underside as well. And there we have it. All right, got the ring in at the 3/4 inch mark. Okay, working on the third stage centering rings. We're gonna first follow the instructions and then we're not. And by that I mean we're gonna have to adjust things a little bit. If you remember when we installed the retainer ring in the bottom of the body tube, I had to cut this ring and shrink it a little bit because it would not fit. Well, the same holds true with this part here. It doesn't quite fit into the body tube. So before we start gluing the centering rings in, we're gonna have to split this and do the same thing, reshape this to fit the body tube. But that's gonna hold off for a minute because first we need to glue in our shock cord mounting bracket. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of wood glue, not much. A little bit goes a long way here. In fact, I'm just gonna put a little dab and I'm gonna take a toothpick and just sort of spread it around. With the toothpick. Okay, first thing we'll do is attach the two halves of this unit. Okay, get them centered and we'll kind of clear out that hole with the toothpick. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to glue this down to the centering ring. Okay. And we'll lay that in position. And in addition to clearing the hole out with the toothpick, that's also centering those holes to put all three in alignment with each other. So just sort of work it around on both sides. There. And I'm going to take a clothespin and just set that on there to help hold that till it dries. So we're going to leave that aside for now. Let me go get the body tube and we'll come back and split this and get this sized correctly. Okay, I've got the main body tube back and I have taken my third stage centering adapter here and drew a straight line perpendicular to the tube, and that's where we're going to cut it, because if you remember, like I mentioned earlier, this will not fit inside the body tube. It's just, there's just no way. And additionally, the centering rings that are supposed to glue inside of it are so loose. I don't know if you can see that gap there. There's quite a bit of gap in there, right down in here. So it would not hurt at all to shrink this a little bit to fit in here. It'll just tidy up everything. So, oops. And I additionally took some scrap cardstock that the centering rings here were punched out of, and I cut out a little bit of a rectangle and I folded a curve into it, just using a little plastic bottle here, just kind of working it around to get that curvature, because this is going to act as like a coupler to hold this in position at the glue joint where I cut it. So that being said, let's go ahead and cut a straight line with a pair of scissors. Okay, and I'm going to trim off just a hair. Okay, and let's just see if this fits better now. I'll just kind of unfold it. Still a little on the tight side. Let me make sure that we don't have any burrs or anything interfering here. No. I think we're so close to being perfect here that it's... Yeah, it's so good that it's a little too tight, actually. So let me trim just a hair off. Again, just the smallest amount. See if that's any better. I still feel like we're gonna be jammed up a little bit there. Okay, I think we're good. Well, I say that, but I'm just going to take off one more little hair. Okay. You know, I know this is taking time, but in the long run, it's going to pay off dividends when it actually works properly. Oh, okay. Yeah, that was smooth. Okay, so now I'm going to take my CA glue. I'm going to lay down a very thin bead. And let's squirt some kicker on this end. Okay, now we'll lay in this little doubler piece here. So I'm going to trim off just a little bit more so we don't interfere with our centering rings. Okay, now we're going to lay this down in the middle. And we're going to have to sand the outer edge a little bit where some glue is oozed out. Okay, let's see how this works. Oh yeah, look at that, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Now let's see if our centering rings fit just as well. See, they even them, they're still a little loose, but they are tighter. But yeah, I think we did the right thing there. Well, that was really our only option, to be honest with you. So, but there's still a little bit of a gap that we'll have to fill in. Okay, now we're doing this while our ring there is still drying. But the other thing I want to point out is I'm going to step aside from the directions where it says to glue the bottom ring in first. This one. Then glue in our tube. And then run our other ring over the top of that. The thing I don't like about that technique is this has to go inside the coupler. I'm sorry, yeah. But how do you get it from going too far in? And if you do push it too far down, there's no way to get to push it back out. See, if I push it too far down, this is going to be sealed with the bottom ring. I'm not going to be able to push it out. So that being said, I'm going to glue both rings into the coupler first and then glue the main tube down into that. So we'll set all that aside. Let's get this piece. It should be dry well enough by now. And we're going to fit it in to the bottom there, just like that. Okay, let me get a piece of wax paper to lay down. Yeah, that'll work just fine. Okay, I'm going to take my wood glue once again. I'm going to run a bead just on the inside, right up against the edge. And I'll spread this with my finger to help make sure it gets to the edge. Okay, and we'll lay this down over our ring. And I'm going to lay a can of, if this is going to work. No, not quite big enough. I'm going to take something that's going to be bigger than that hole. I should have planned this first. There we go. Just to help keep the centering ring flat while it dries around the edge. Okay, so we're going to just let that sit and dry for a minute, and we'll come back and install the top ring. Okay, after the lower centering ring dried, I did go back in and lay a fillet around the perimeter again, just to kind of fill in any gaps and give it a little more strength. And that is something that I'm going to do on this one as well. And again, if I have the tube installed, I won't be able to access these to do those inner fillets. So that's why I've elected to hold off on inserting the tube until these are both completely in. So now this one's set up, we can go ahead and install the upper ring. Same process as before. Gonna lay a bead of wood glue around the perimeter. Now I'm going to go back in again with my finger and kind of pull this out to the edge where the ring's actually going to be sitting. Okay. And again, I've still got my wax paper down on the bench. I'm actually going to just insert it from this side first and get it down below the lip of the tube, and then flip it over. And then I'm going to take, you can take anything, a screwdriver. I'm going to take the handle of my X-Acto and just work around the edge. That's pushing it back down flush with the tube. And you know it's working because it's starting to stick to the wax paper. That's a good sign that you're getting down flush with the tube. There we go. Wipe off the tip. And let's just get a visual here. Okay, looks good. Now there's a little bit of a gap there. Let me press that down. Okay. Okay. Just kind of feeling around a little bit. Kind of wipe up some of that excess. And since we're here, we can actually go ahead and lay in our fillet. Since what little bit of wood glue was already there has kind of locked it in position already. So now we can just strengthen it with this fillet. There we go. Okay. Just make sure everything here looks good. Okay, I'm gonna set that down and dry. When this is done, we'll come back and do the Kevlar shot cord, which I've already got pre-cut to 6 inches, and I'll talk more about that here when we're ready for it. Okay, the coupler has had time to dry and cure, and we've got both centering rings in, nicely fitted. I did sand down a little bit at that joint where we had to splice it a little bit, but that came out nice and smooth. And I do want to show you now. This is pretty impressive, but this whole unit now, whoops, fits beautifully. I mean, it's darn near perfect. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you. Why am I having trouble? Because I'm doing it at this weird angle. But anyway, there you see. So couldn't be more pleased with that. But now we can go ahead and insert our Kevlar shot cord mount. And the way I want to do this is I cut it at 6 inches like they called for in the manual. But at each cut joint, I CA glued it with thin CA, which would wick in nicely. And then I cut it at an angle to make a point. And that will make inserting it through the hole a lot easier. So from the bottom side, I'm just going to insert both pointed ends. And from the underside, I'm just going to pull it out and get both ends even. And I'm just going to tie a single knot. See if we can do this on camera. There we go. And we'll tie that nice and tight. And so as not to make it too brittle, I will glue the knot a little bit with some wood glue, which is a little bit more flexible than CA. So we're just going to dab that on the knot, kind of squeeze it into the knot, saturating it just like that. Then we can pull that loop out, and we've got a perfect Kevlar shot cord mount. Okay, now we need to insert our tube. And let's do a dry fit. We want to make sure the front is facing outward. So the rear is going to go through from the top ring and then just barely out. Well, we'll go ahead and slide it through the bottom ring And then when we glue it, we're just going to push that back in flush. And that looks really good. Okay, so I'm going to run a bead of glue. We don't want any on the outside, but if we do, that's okay, because it's going to get covered up with a shroud anyway, but we want to keep it clean. If you take the time to make your build clean, even in the hidden spots, that shows an attention to detail that will reflect in the overall completed project as well. So that just, you know, it's good to be that way. Okay, make sure we got the right end here. We'll run another bead along here. Okay, get that flush with the bottom. Sorry, I was off camera there, but I was really having to work the twisting of the tube. Okay, let me wipe this excess off to kind of get an idea of where we're at. Okay. Wipe my fingers off, getting pretty. In fact, I'm going to get a new paper towel. Okay, let's check the other side. That looks pretty good. And you know what, we can run a fillet now. Let me clean that tip off. Let's run a fillet around this joint here. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, I'm really pleased with that. So I'm gonna let this sit and dry now. And let's see if I can find something to perch this up on. Let's take this cup right here, set that there. Okay, so it'll be flat. All right, we'll just let that cure and we'll come back when it's all done. Okay, the glue hasn't fully cured yet, but it's strong enough where it's holding in position. I'm going to go ahead and take one of our center rings that we cut out from the center ring, and now it's going to glue on top of the lip of the tube that's on this in the middle there. Okay, so I'm going to take our wood glue, and I'm going to run a bead all the way around the base. Okay, I'm going to pull it toward the center. Which is where it's actually going to contact the ring, and then I'll spread the rest out in the form of a fillet. So let me get this centered on our tube. It's the exact same diameter as the tube, so you got to be somewhat meticulous with this. That if you push down in the center and you don't see it collapsing anywhere, see it's collapsing over here, so I know I need to slide it that way a little bit. There. Okay, we'll wipe down that fillet. Okay, and I'm going to take some weight and press down on this to help keep it down flush while it continues to dry. So, all right, we'll just let that be. I may try to clean this up a little bit too off camera, and we'll come back when it's all done. Okay, the next step will be the third stage foundation wrap. Now, I pre-cut this out already, and I'll tell you, if you don't have a pair of curved scissors, these are a game changer. They make this so easy to do. It's so much easier than straight scissors. Anyway, that being said, I've got it cut out and I've got the little attachment piece as well. Now, you might see a little bit of a curvature in it. It's because I took a can of spray paint and I just wrapped it to kind of imprint that shape so it wants to fold up on me and roll, which will help when we glue it together. Additionally, I also did the same thing to my little piece here. Otherwise, if this is too flat, then you might get a little flat spot. So you can just take, let's take I use this pin here just to kind of impress upon just a little bit of curvature into it. And that actually does matter. Okay, see there's a bit of a curvature there to it. I don't know if it's focusing or not. But that will aid in getting a nice smooth contour as we wrap it. Okay, the next little trick I want to share with you is to get this joint flat, so to speak. We're going to tape down one edge to our bench. We're going to wrap this around, and we're going to tape this end down as well, giving us a nice flat junction there. So we want to butt this end up against that end and then lay another, okay, get it nice and even. Okay, not sure how well you can see that, but it's got the joint nice and flat and flush to each other. So that's got us in better position for gluing this down. Now the instructions say to leave a gap of about 1/16 of an inch on the top and the bottom of the strip. So I'm going to take some wood glue and just well, let me go ahead and put it on here, but just a very small amount. We don't need to overdo it on this. Okay. And then take our curved attachment piece, lay it right on that joint. I know this is hidden and I apologize, but I'm sure you can get the idea of what I'm doing. Okay, we're just going to glue that right down the center. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, then I'll remove it, and then we will attach this to our tube. Okay, the foundation wrap is complete. It's dried, and let me just kind of show it to you here. You can see that seam is practically seamless. I do have that strip that we glued on, and I still have the existing Scotch tape. I risked damaging the cardstock if I tried to peel it off, and I just figured to leave it on. It doesn't harm anything by being there, so we left it, but that came out darn near perfect. Once we get that primered and sanded and painted, I don't think you're ever going to notice there was ever a seam there. So the next step is we got to take our body tube, which we created earlier, and we need to slip this onto it. Oh, perfect fit. We're going to slide that all the way down to the base. Perfect seal right there, that joint. Okay, and then the instructions call for marking a line around the circumference of the tube right where the top of the transition piece sets. So I'm just going to follow this all the way around. Okay, that should do it. And we're going to gently try to rotate this off the tube without damaging it. I'll just kind of shimmy it back and forth. You can see there is our pencil line. In fact, there's no need to take this all the way off, to be honest with you. So we'll just leave it right there. And we're going to glue it on. So we're going to take some white, wood glue, and we're going to run some wood glue just above that line. That way the ring will capture the glue and kind of pull it down as it seats down into position. So I'm just going to draw this glue line just above the line we just drew. Okay, and as we get closer, I'm going to put a bead of glue around the inside rim so it'll sit nicely onto that base. But I want to wait till we get a little bit closer, that way there's, in case it drips, it won't take long. Okay, gonna run my bead of glue. I apologize that you're not able to see this too well, but some things are just, if I adjust the angle to show the camera, I'm not going to get the right angle to do what I need to do to get it on correctly, so I apologize for that. Okay, there we go. And now I'm just going to squeeze this down until it seats itself on the top of that base. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to wipe around, kind of like making a fillet. There we go. Gorgeous, absolutely perfect. Okay, so now we have to do, again, the hardest thing to do in modeling is to be patient and wait and just let things dry. Okay, the next step in the manual is to build up the display nozzles that are going to go on the aft end of the rocket, not during flight purposes, but of course for display and static uses. There are 5 sets of nozzles. Of course, they glue together and make 5 engines. I am not going to show you all of them on camera, obviously. I'll just take one set and do an example for you. And let me snip these little ends off here. Okay, and we'll snip this one as well. And we want to save these because these have our little discs. I'm going to hold off on cutting on those because I don't want to lose them. But just keep in mind, we've got to save those for later. And oh, there's one little piece here I need to trim off. Okay. So obviously, first thing you want to do is do some dry fitting. Make sure everything lines up nicely, which it does. Now I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a combination of plastic cement and some quick setting Tamiya cement as well. So I want to trim off this edge a little bit here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to use, actually, instead of dabbing, slapping this on haphazardly, I'm going to apply it very gently with a toothpick. And we have a little bit of working time with it too. That's the nice thing about it. So let me just take my toothpick. Let's fill in these holes. On the top posts, and we'll spread the glue around a little bit there. And on the flat part. There's a couple little holes here. Okay, now we can take our nozzle and just line those holes up and squeeze it shut. And while we're holding it, we can then go ahead and use our quick setting cement and just draw right along that line there. Keep pinching, and it'll absorb into the crack through capillary action without problem. So just hold that secured. Let's hit this side as well. Okay. And again, we don't have to worry about strength so much as we would normally do, because this is not going to be flying. This is for display only. And we can go ahead and glue the inside to preserve the looks of the outside. I think we about got it. Okay, it's holding solid. So there's one engine nozzle complete. I will do the other 4 off camera, and I'll probably just go ahead and go out and paint them off camera as well, just to simplify things. But I'll come back in when they're done and painted, and then we'll show you how they glue into the bulkhead. Okay, continuing on with the display engine nozzles. As you can see, they are painted, and I'll tell you what I did. I basically just primed them with gray primer, cheap Rust-Oleum primer, and then after that dried, I hit it with my airbrush, and I used AK Interactive paint, and I used Jet Exhaust AK 486. This leaves a nice metal, kind of rusted, finished look. Not the rust color, but kind of used, in that it's kind of runny and thin, so there's areas where the primer is bleeding through, and in my opinion that leaves a really good post test flight burn look to it a little bit. It's not pristine, not brand new, but because as you know, the Saturn V engines the F1s were fired in testing before flight, so you'll never see a Saturn V with a pristine looking engine. So I really like the effect that this paint gives. And the nice thing about it, no thinning at all. It's thin right out of the bottle. You don't have to mix it with anything. Okay, that being said, everything's dry. I'm going to glue it into the bulkhead, all 5 engines. And once I do, I'm actually going to borrow my command module tube, because the actual tube that's going to go here is drying. I painted it, and it's outside drying right now, so I don't have it to use. So I'm going to use this to press down on the engine nozzles and add weight to it to keep the bulkhead flat and everything even. Yeah, you'll see what I mean when I get to it. So I'm going to take some plastic cement. Let's go ahead and install these. Now these, there's 2 posts obviously. One is based right out of the engine nozzle, and one is this little side tube. The engine nozzle center goes to the outer hole. Okay, so we're going to take care of this, and on the inside hole, the nozzle goes on the center hole, obviously. So we'll just kind of plug all these in. Okay, flip it over. And see how it's kind of springy because there's, yeah, it just doesn't sit flat because of the warp in the cardboard. So adding this and the weight on it is going to keep everything flat for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our little plastic rings here. Grab a few of them here. And I'm going to just wrap this with some plastic cement. And press them down. Okay. There's no use bothering you watching me do all this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to complete all these. I'm going to set this in the middle, and I'm going to apply some weight to the top of this tube just to help keep this flat. We'll come back when these are dry, and then the adapter's dry, and we'll glue it on as well. Okay, the engine nozzle display piece is complete. In addition to gluing down the coupler part that kind of keeps things in alignment and everything, I did paint it white just for aesthetics, even though you'll never see it. I just did that on my own. But you'll notice how it fits perfectly between the inner and outer plastic washers that are what lock the engines in. So it gives this perfect alignment on the bulkhead itself. So that part is complete, and when the rocket's done, this will make a nice display piece. Okay, the next step we have is to cut and install our vacuform wraps. The first one you have to work with is the first stage wrap, and this is really the only one that they actually give specific dimensions for. From the top to the bottom, it has to be exactly 3 inches. So what we're going to do is cut the top first where we need to cut it, and then measure down 3 inches from there and get our baseline for the bottom. Now you'll notice there's 2 raceway ends right here, and they extrude just a little bit ahead of the other ridges. So what I want to do is make my cut line just north of where that raceway kind of drops back down into the flat plastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip it over. This is now upside down, but I'm going to push the ruler up against those raceways, and then I'm going to back it off equal amounts. And I'm doing this by sight as best I can. You really only get one shot at this, so I want to make sure it's perfect. There, that looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to take a brand new X-Acto blade. You don't want to do this with the rough blade. And you just want to draw a couple score lines down the plastic. You don't have to cut all the way through. Just enough to score the plastic, and then it just literally folds over. And if you just snap it back and forth, it cuts itself beautifully. That is perfect, actually. Gorgeous. You'll notice on the back side I did mark a T for top, just so I don't get confused when time comes to glue this down. But now, like I mentioned, we need to do 3 inches now exactly from the top to the bottom. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to measure. I'm going to use this little ridge as a guideline from the top to the bottom. Okay, and we'll do the same over here. Okay. Now, just like we did before, I'll take my straight edge, place it on those lines. And just make some light cuts. I'm not even really applying much pressure, to be honest with you. And it's more than enough. There we go. Now, that is really good. The instructions do call for trimming the sides off, and what they recommend is you trim the left side flush and then leave a little excess on the right, and that gives you some buffer so you can trim that as need be, but at least you have something to start with over here. So let me go ahead and trim this one. Okay, oh, that actually went right through. It didn't even mean to. Okay, so now we will bring in the body tube and we'll work on the dimensions for cutting to fit, size to fit. Okay, a couple things to note here. Off camera, I did go ahead and start wrapping around the tube. And the tube, yes, you'll notice it's now gray. This has been primered and sanded and primered and sanded and primered and sanded. You can maybe see a faint line. I'm not sure. Let me try to get the light on the camera here. There's a faint line right there. That is a center line that I drew the entire length of the tube using a tube drawing guide. We need to use that as a reference. All the wraps are going to be based on that line, so it's very important that that line be straight. I did wrap our first stage wrap along the bottom side, and it looks like we're going to need to trim it right about there. Okay, so that'll be my cut line. And then additionally, because I had the 3-inch wrap here. That gave me a reference to wrap some masking tape, because after I unravel this, we're going to sand this to make it rougher so the adhesive will stick better. So let me go ahead and now remove the tape here. And we will cut our wrap. Okay. Again, those are very light cuts, so if you've got a nice sharp blade, it won't take much at all. Okay, let's just do another quick little test fit. Oh yeah, that came out nice. And what little gap there might be will easily be filled in with some putty, and you'll never know it was there. Okay, so that's good to go. Now, because I've got the tape on here, that gives me a buffer for sanding. So now I'm going to go ahead and sand all this area up to the tape. Okay, there we go. All right, so now I can go ahead and remove the tape. Tell you what, I'm actually going to leave the tape on. I'm thinking as on the fly here, I'm going to keep that on as a reference to help as we're wrapping the tube. That I think should help us out. So let me go ahead and get the adhesive ready, and we will wrap the tube. Okay, the next step is actually spraying down the back of the wrap with some, I'm using 3M Super 77 multi-purpose adhesive. The instructions just say to use spray adhesive. This is sufficient. Make sure you shake it up well. Now I did double side tape the outside facing wrap to the surface down below the paper, because we definitely want to make sure and spray the back side. Don't mess that up. I'm sure it's easy to do, but go ahead and get your can ready to go, and just make some nice sweeping passes starting off the paper and ending off the paper. That way you'll get a nice uniform coverage. So let's go ahead and do it. Okay. Going to let that sit for about 5 minutes until it tacks up, and then we will apply it to our body. Okay, it's been 4 to 5 minutes already, and the adhesive is tacked up to the point where we can go ahead and glue it down. I've got my body tube here. You can see I've had to redraw my line a little bit, which is perfectly understandable because I sanded all this down. So I'm going to leave the tape on as a reference, and this line is where we're going to start our wrap. So let me take the wrap, make sure we have the T facing up for top. I'm going to align this both on this line, the bottom, and with the blue tape. Okay, there's the start. Okay, we're just going to work it around. And we're just going to press hard as we go, making sure everything stays in alignment. So far so good, getting close to the end. Okay, and we're right back to where we started. And all that little extra stretching, and we gained a little length in our wrap, which is fine. Now is the time to take care of it. But what I'm going to actually do is go ahead and lay it down as if complete. Then I'm going to take, let me rotate this a little bit this way, and we're actually going to cut through both layers. Be careful you don't go through the cardboard. There's one strip. We can gently lift that up, and if there's any strip under here we need to lift, right there, pull that off. Now we have absolute perfect alignment. Okay, I'm going to take some tape and just strap this down, so to speak, to help while the adhesive cures. But all in all, very satisfied with that wrap. It came out very good. Just keep in mind when you do that final stretch, you may end up with a little bit longer length than you anticipated, but if you slice through both layers and peel up the top of one and the bottom of the other, they'll lay down perfectly flush together. So nothing to complain about there. All right, gonna let that dry for a little bit. Okay, one thing I would like to do before we move on is I've unwrapped everything. Everything's holding well. However, you know, there's always the possibility that this joint right here might lift. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take some Tamiya plastic cement, the brush-on type, and I'm just going to help bond that joint right there. Which is basically molding the two halves together. And that'll hopefully help prevent any future lifting on that joint. So again, just something I like to do as kind of a backup. That'll kind of help hold things together. So just wanted to share that with you real quick. Okay, I'm getting ready to apply the third stage wrap on the third stage upper tube here, and eventually we're going to get to this lower transitional wraparound. This has been sprayed, and I'm going to let it tack up for another minute or so, and while I wait for it to dry, I want to show you the body tube. You know, as you remember, you saw me apply the lower wrap, but I've gone and applied all the other wraps, and they went down nicely with a couple exceptions. In a couple places here on these upper layers, we did have some lifting. So I had to go back in with some super glue and apply them and tape them down. So that's the reason for the tape, is just helping the glue lay down a little bit better. But and then also this piece right here started to lift, so I had to run a bead of CA glue. But that's just minor, and you'll have to go back over your wraps and make little final touch-ups as needed. But for the most part, the main body tube is completely done, the wrapping. So since that is out of the way. Now it's time to start this piece here, and it's been tacked up for, oh, I sprayed it 4 or 5 minutes ago. So now using the reference line that I had drawn earlier, and what I've decided to do is you're supposed to have it even here and even here. However, when I dry fitted it, there was maybe a 1/16 of an inch of a gap right here. In fact, you can see the line that I drew, but then when this shroud got laid down, it was a little bit short. So what I'm going to do is, though, I'm going to glue this even with the top, and then when I do my wrap around here, I'm going to wrap this around up to the bottom of that piece. And if that doesn't make sense, you'll understand better when I do it for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and take our piece right here. Okay, it is tacky. So I'm going to lay, again, I'm going to start at the top and stay even with the tube on the top, and then lay this on our reference line. Right there. Okay, lay that down. And just press as we go. There was a little bit of a dimple here in the plastic in the vacuum form, and not much I could do about that. If I tried to heat it and flat it, I'd probably just make it worse. So we're just gonna have to go with it as is and see if maybe we can do something with the primer and paint later. But everything's laying straight here nicely. I will have to trim a little bit of excess off, but I wanted to wait until I got this wrapped to get a direct size. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take our knife and cut down along that seam line. Actually, if I do a little bit here and a little bit here, then I can fold it. Okay. Let's see if I can take my straight edge. Oops. And then just score a line. Okay, and we'll just fold it. And it just breaks right off. Okay, a little bit of a gap there. I'm not sure why or how that happened, but we can fill that in later with more plastic. So a little misalignment on my part, and a little bit overlap right there on the top edge. We can actually, here, let me just kind of using the cardboard, and I can do sandpaper too. And we'll sand that all out. In fact, here we go. Okay, now we're back even. Okay, again, a little bit off there, and I can fill that in. Save some of your scrap, because you can use that to help fill in little gaps if need be. So again, that's just one of those little minor fine tuning that you may have to do after the fact. So, okay, very good. Okay, we're gonna let this cure up. I'll fix this off camera, and then we'll get to our conical wrap. Okay, now we're about ready to wrap the transitional cone part here. Just to let you know, I ran a bead of medium CA down this gap just to kind of help seep in and discourage any lifting. and it seems like it's going to hold. And instead of filling this in with plastic, once I get the rocket primered, I'm going to go and see if I need to fill in, which I'm sure I'll need to fill in a little bit of filler there, and then we'll sand that down and get it all nice and even. But just wanted to show you this. That little dimple there is still prominent, and there's really nothing I can do about it, like I said, other than once we get it primered, sand that down, and maybe we'll kind of conceal it. But in the time being, like I said, there's a little bit of a gap right here on the bottom. I'm going to conceal that gap with the upper lip from this transitional piece here. Okay, so it's been setting up long enough. We're going to line it up on the center line just like we did here, and just do our conical wrap all the way around. So this has been sitting for about 4 or 5 minutes now. And the key is to getting a good start, and then everything should follow in suit. So I'm just going to push this up against the bottom of that wrap that we just did, centered on the line. And lay it down. Okay. And we're just going to follow it around. Now be careful you don't press too hard in here because it's hollow underneath under here, and we don't want to damage it. Okay, so just keep pulling and stretching and pressing and everything you can think of to manipulate that plastic. And takes us right back to the beginning. Okay, very nice. I like the way that laid down. Okay. See, we covered up that gap pretty nicely. Okay, so we're done with the wrap. Awesome. Okay, while all the wraps and glue are setting up on the main body tube and the upper stage, it's time to go ahead and work on the fins. Now, I've already done 3 of them off camera, and I'm going to show you how I did it on the 4th one. And there's a million different ways of gluing this together. You know, Estes properly just recommends you take some glue and glue them together. And but I took it to the next step. I'm actually using 3 different glues, and here's why. The fins glue together in a few different ways. One, you've got 2 holes here where a post on the other fin will insert. Okay, that's one type of joint. Another joint is a flat joint, which is the leading edge, and you can kind of see the shade difference. It's about 1/4 of an inch of the leading edge there is flat, and that's where the 2 pieces will mate. So that's a flat joint. And then the tip and the trailing edge is a very thin joint. So I'm using 3 different glues for the 3 different joints. I'm using the tube cement in the holes. I'm going to use the regular drying Tamiya cement so it won't dry up too quickly to lay down on the leading edge. And then while that's all setting up, then I'm going to go around the other 2 outer edges, the tip edge and the trailing edge, with the quick setting one, because that will dry much quicker. So that's how I'm going to do it, and so far it's worked out very well. But again, any one of these glues in and of themselves will be just fine. It's just personal preference. Okay, so I'm just going to take my tube glue and just put a little dab on the hole where the post will insert. Okay, then I want to take my regular dry time cement and just brush it on the leading edge. Okay, now I'm going to mate the 2 surfaces together. Okay, just like that. Then I'm going to take the thin quick setting glue and just paint it on the tip. And the trailing edge. Okay, and I'm just going to take a clothespin and help hold the leading edge down while it dries. But everything else is pretty much done. So again, that's just one of a million ways of doing it. I just enjoy doing it that way. Personal preference. So with that, the fins are done. Now we're going to start working on the fairings and getting these attached to the body tube. Okay, and continuing on with our fin preparation and construction, I've done a couple things off camera. Steps 1 and 2 are basically just cutting out the vacuum formed fin fairings. You see I got them all cut out here and ready to go. And I also took the cardboard cardstock and cut out the 4 fairing bases, as well as the fairing guide, which we won't use just yet, but I've got this cut out and ready. So what I'm going to do is take a step aside from the directions again. They recommend that you glue these cardstock bases in with plastic cement, and I have no doubt that that would work just fine. However, I've had experiences where I've used plastic cement, and if used just a little bit too much, you have the possibility of overheating and warping the plastic, and you actually get little deformities, grooves, lines, dents, bumps, all sorts of little ugly things. So to avoid that possibility, I've decided to go with some 30-minute epoxy. So I've already got my epoxy pre-mixed. It's again 30-minute, and I'm just going to use it. And for any dissimilar pieces, whereas here we got plastic to paper, epoxy works great. So I have no qualms about using this and it holding. So I'm just going to spread it on with a popsicle stick. And then we're going to wipe it pretty thin. I don't want this to be, you know, too bulky and cumbersome. And then when we slide it in, if it's too much, it's going to ooze out. And see, okay, that was not good. It's going to ooze out and just make a bigger mess. So I'm just going to make it as thin a layer as I can. Okay. And we'll just slip this into place and slide it down. Okay, just kind of adjust the corners to get it as even as you can. Just press it down into place. And there you go. It pretty much holds itself because there's a little bit of a groove that it fits into. So that's one complete. I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 off camera, and we will come back and cut these out further and have them ready to glue onto the body tube. Okay, now that the epoxy is dried and all the bases are securely fastened inside the fairing, it's time to now cut them out. And this, we're just going to have to, I'm going to actually freehand it. I need to gently run the knife around the perimeter of the fairing, and very important, get a new blade. This is a brand new blade. Even if you've used an old blade once, it's worth just getting a new blade on it. And I'm not going to cut all the way through. I'm just going to make a light score line. I'm just going to kind of draw around the edge. Okay. Not sure, I may not have applied enough pressure that time. We'll see. Let's see. Oh yeah, I can work it. Just enough of a score that folding it back and forth should break it free. Not quite. Almost. There we go. Okay. We'll do this side the same way. Beautiful. All right, now for the front, I'm going to take actually some rounded scissors and incrementally cut that down to the edge. There we go. Okay. And now this part, I'm going to actually use the base as a guide for the knife blade to follow, because we want to cut right along this rim right here. And fortunately, the blade is deeper than the base, so I can still use it and it won't be... Let me see, what's the best angle to do this at? And we'll be able to sand this flesh after the fact, because there's a little bit of a lip that's going to hinder you from cutting it flush. Okay, so let's see if this is gonna work. Oh yeah, that works lovely. That really does work good. Yeah, that'll sand it right down flush to the base. Just a little bit more here. Yeah, really good. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do, actually, you know what, while we're here, let's go ahead and cut out the fin slot, and we'll do a test fit on our fins. Okay. You'll see why it's so important that you have a sharp blade, because it actually kind of goes through like butter. Because if it's dull, you're going to be pushing down and it's going to flex instead of slicing through. So a new blade is definitely the way to go. Okay, let's do a test fit. Slip that on and let's see if it goes all the way in. Look at that, like a glove. Not quite sure you can see, but yeah, you just follow the inside lines and you're gonna get a perfect fit. So, excellent. Okay, I'm gonna do the other the other three off camera, and then we will be, yeah, I was gonna think there's nothing else to do other than glue these onto the body tube, so we're getting closer. Okay, obviously a lot's changed since the last viewing of this tail end here. The fairings are cut out and they are ready to glue on. The fins have all been attached. In fact, all the fairings have been glued on too, except for this final one I'm going to show you. But just to show you real quick what it looks like, and we'll get back to the open one here. I've got a little cradle set up. As the rocket's getting bigger, it's becoming more and more difficult to set this up to film for obvious reasons. It's taking up a lot of workbench space. But I do want to show you the process in which I've been gluing these together. All 4 fins were glued on, and I used the fairing to hold it in position, and then I used the included template to lay over top and make sure it's vertical and perpendicular to the body tube. So that was done in order to glue the fins down. I glued them down with plastic cement, and then after the base dried, I went around it and laid down a fillet of more plastic cement just to beef it up a little bit. And then for the fairings, and I'll show you how I do that here when I put this one on. Basically, I used plastic cement on the base of the fairing to hold it in position, and while that's drying, then while holding the front down, I just basically paint with my Tamiya cement. I just paint on a layer of cement along the seams, and they're holding just fine. And there'll be some gaps to fill in, like for example on this fairing here, you see a little bit of a gap. Once I get the rocket primered, I'll really be able to see where I need to put putty and fill in gaps and make things look a little bit better, but and that's to be expected. So let's go ahead and get this final fairing placed. I'm going to remove it, and I'm just going to run a bead of cement. Okay. And we'll lay it down, and we're going to lay it so it's flush with the bottom of the rocket as best as we can. Okay. Open up my jar of cement here. And just paint that right along the seam. And you'll notice how quickly it sets up. In fact, it's already holding it down. So, all right, so that wraps up the final fairing. We'll come back and I'll put a little putty, maybe make a little putty fillets. We can actually do some fillets with plastic cement in the larger gaps. And then the next thing will be installing the center raceways in between the top and bottom marks that we've made. And so we'll let this dry, set up, and then we'll come back and do those. Okay, the next step is to cut out this area you see right here between the fairings and up until you get to the grid lines there. I've already cut out the other 3 off camera, but now I've got one more to go, and I wanted to show you how I do it. It's very straightforward. If you start at this corner here and go to this corner here, you're just maybe a 1/16 of an inch shy of that. Let me see if I can show you that retainer ring. There's just maybe a 1/16 of an inch gap right there, but that's okay. So what I've noticed is, instead of just trying to cut through, you may get a wandering blade, or it may stray away from you. Just make and use the fairing as a guide. Just make the absolute lightest cut you can make. I'm not putting any pressure, I'm just sliding it along the surface. And what that does is it builds in a little bit of a groove that when you do decide to apply pressure, oops, it'll follow that groove. Okay, I'm starting to increase a little bit now, and it's still staying in the groove. Okay, now we've got a definite line going here. That's good. Just keep in mind where your finger is underneath. You don't want it under the blade, so when it goes through, it doesn't take skin with the cardboard. There we go. Okay, and we can come back through this side and kind of like a saw, just kind of saw our way through and make sure we're all the way through. There, just like that. And we'll do the same to this side. You can hear it going through the cardboard. That's a good sign. In fact, let's go ahead and puncture. Oh, it already went through. Okay, now we'll do a straight line across. I'm going to cut right at the bottom of these grids. It's going to cut a little bit of this point here off. You can see this part here comes down just a little bit below that, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and cut through it. Sorry if we're off camera here. I got to get my eyes right over it to make sure the line's straight, and I'm competing with the camera eye. But ultimately my eyes need to win because I need to see what I'm doing. There we go. And it should just come right out. There you go. Okay, so now we've got all four cut out. Good to go. Okay, next up we've got to install the raceways on the sides of the rocket between the wraps that we've already installed. Here are the raceways, and I want to show you a little technique that I came across that will really make this a whole lot easier. Let me show you how quick and easy this process really is. So I'm just going to hold it up to its bottom position. I'm going to push it up against the other raceway, and I'm going to find exactly where it needs to be cut on the top part. And I'm going to lay my single edge razor blade right up against it. I'm going to press down, make a little slice. I'm going to come down to my board here. I'm going to find that slice, and I'm going to press as hard as I can. It's not going to go all the way through, but give a good little impression with your blade. See if it'll focus. There it is. And if you just literally just bend it here, I'll do it this way, sideways, so you can see it. Just bend it and it'll snap right at that part right there. Okay, then break it off and you've got a nice clean cut. You can sand it off if you need to square things up a little bit there. Now when you get to the final fitting, you will have to sand a little bit of the corner off to alleviate that little ridge right there. So let's go ahead and sand a little bit off that. Okay, and then it lies right there in place. Now you're going to have to use filler regardless of this technique or any other technique, but again, I'm going to hold off on that until I prime it because that'll give me a better surface to look at for the overall rocket. And the way I glue this is I'm just going to take some super glue and I'm going to lay it down between the lines that we've already marked. And I'm not putting a lot down. You don't want to overdo it because it'll spread out, it'll squeegee out and just make a mess of everything. So kind of get some out, spread it like that. Take your piece, set it right between the raceways. Just like that. Okay, and if you've got any kicker or anything you want to spray on it to speed up the process, go right ahead. And then get a paper towel here and dry up some of that. And because this is plastic to plastic on the ends, I just take some quick setting thin Tamiya cement and just wick that into the seam. And that'll help create that plastic to plastic bond. Okay, I'm going to do this top portion off camera. Same exact process, just a little bit longer. And do all the raceways the same way around the whole rocket, and you should be good to go. Now after this, it's time to be starting the upper escape module and the lunar module. I'm sorry, the command module. A lot of modules on this. Okay, next up is the launch escape tower, or the LES for short. And there's a lot of little pieces we need to cut out of the sprue here. We need to cut out these little thrusters. So let's take our nippers here and just cut these little guys off. Okay, we're going to need this little positioning ring for the tower. We're going to need this base for the thrusters. And we're going to need this little nose cone portion. And I say this little nose cone, this is actually the very tippy top of the rocket when on the pad. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to take our two thrusters, and they will intersect each other. One will slip on top of the other. Let me see if I can fit them in. There we go. Okay, they fit in nicely. Not sure if you can see that or not, but that's the positioning. And I'm just going to press them on the bench to get them nice and level. And I'm going to take my quick setting cement and just put a little dab on there, let it wick in, and that'll seal that part all together. Okay, and then this whole contraption is going to go into this little portion here. In fact, we can go ahead and drop it in. It looks like a Phillips head screw, but this just fits right into. There, just like that. Okay, and then we're going to take some more cement. And just dab it on there and let it wick in. Okay, so we're going to set this whole base aside for the time being. We're going to take our two tower assemblies here, and we're going to line them up. Now, before we get too excited about gluing them together, we don't want to forget about this ring. So what I'm actually going to do first is set it in there. You can't miss the notches. There's only one way it can go. Set it in those notches. This is pretty tedious little work here. Okay, I'm going to take my cement. There we go. Okay. Now, before it sets too permanently and it's still a little loose, we can go ahead and fit the other side on. Make sure you line up those notches. There, just like that. And you want to pinch and make sure everything lines up with each other. Once you do, go Go ahead and glue your cement right down that seam. It'll wick in to its proper spot. Just hold that for a second and it'll grab and bite pretty good and bond, and that's what it's designed to do. While that's curing, we'll go ahead and put glue on the other side of the ring. Okay, we'll flip it over and we'll do the other side. There. It's amazing how this cement just bonds everything together and it becomes one solid unit. Very, very impressive technology with the cement. Okay, now we want to take our base that we had created earlier, and with the most narrow portion facing down, we want to get those little pegs, those 4 posts, into these 4 holes, just like that. So go ahead and work it into position. Okay, they're in. If you've glued everything properly, everything should just fall right into place anyhow. Okay, and then we'll just, again, take our cement. Dab it right on the joint. And everything will secure. Okay, now we're just gonna set that down for a moment and we're gonna let that dry. In fact, let me set it over to the side a little bit. Now we're gonna do the capsule. I'm gonna actually combine a couple steps here in one. We wanna take our, it looks like a 1/4 inch launch lug because that's what it originally was, but we wanna take our little nose cone piece here, and because these are 2 dissimilar types of material, I'm actually going to use CA glue. I'm not going to use plastic cement. So I'm going to put the glue on the inside. Okay, going to take our nose cone piece, we're going to press it in, and we're going to twist as we go, just to help spread the glue. And there you go, just like that. Now they say to start gluing these onto the top of the command module. However, I want to actually put the clay in first, because the more manipulation I have to do with this attached, I might snap it off. So I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to put the clay in first. So let me go get the clay and we'll be right back. Okay, we got the command module. Basically, it's the launch escape system shroud that covers up the command module. We're going to take our 4 pieces of clay. Now this kit comes with 8 pieces. We're going to use the other 4 later on, but we're going to start out with these first 4. And they're kind of stuck together. Okay, we'll go ahead and just kind of roll them up into a ball. And I'm going to place it as far forward as I can up into the nose. Just press it as good as you can. See, this is why I did not want the tower attached. It would have already snapped into 1,000 pieces at this point. Okay, take our other piece. Okay, and 2 more. Now my recommendation too is before we glue on the tower portion, just handling this clay, you're imparting some of that oil and residue from the clay onto the outer surface, and that may affect the way the paint secures to it later on. So after I get this clay in, I'm going to go wash the surface off before we proceed in gluing everything else together. Okay, so now one thing they don't call for, but I like to do, is whenever I put clay in a nose cone, is just run a small thin bead of glue around the edge, just to help keep it in place so it doesn't come loose, because once this rocket's assembled, you're not going to have access to this area again. So just a thin bead, kind of like a fillet. Okay, so we can set this aside for a second, because there is one more thing we can do, is glue the tower onto the top of this assembly here. So it's going to fit in just like that. So once again, I'm going to put the CA glue on the inside of the tube. Okay, and just press that in and twist. Okay, just like that. You can stand it up, make sure everything's vertical and level and straight, which it is. Looks good. So again, we're going to let that sit and cure. I'm going to go wash the plastic off here and wash my hands to get that oily residue off my fingers as well. And then we'll come back and glue that part on. Okay, the glue is pretty well dried. It's not going to flow anymore, at least, so we can rotate it around. I did take it to the sink and I cleaned it with soap and water. So that's all degreased. My hands are nice and clean as well. So now we can go ahead and attach the tower to the shroud. And it's just a matter of lining up those 4 posts and inserting them into the 4 holes. And they line up nicely. And once we get them in, I'm just going to go ahead and take my cement. Okay. And we'll just put a dab of cement on each post. Just like that. There you have it. Beautiful piece. Okay, next we're going to work on the service module. I've already taken the wrap from the instructions and wrapped it around the tube. So we've got our location marks as to where to cut. Not only do you want to tape the wrap together, but you want to anchor it to the tube itself at one point so it doesn't rotate on you after you started cutting, because that'll mess things up. So there's 5 things we need to do here. Get a knife with obviously a fresh blade. We're going to cut out this little notch here. This is going to be for our wire anchor. So I'm just going to draw straight down, slow and steady. Okay, and then I'm going to go to each hole for the RCSs and just kind of twist with my knife. One more. Okay, now we can remove the tape. And you know me, I don't like to cut up original instructions if I don't have to, so I photocopied this wrap. And so it's intact, the original's still intact. Okay, so there we have it. Now we need to make the wire for that anchor point. So let me go ahead and show you how much of a nerd I am. And just to make things easier, I wrapped some tape around the center of it and I measured it. It's 1.5 inches long. So I made a mark at the 3/4 inch point, and that's where I'm going to center my bend. And I'm going to make 2 bends going either direction, centered right over that point I drew. And I'm just going to fold the wire 90 degrees. Both sides. Okay. Now we can tear that tape off. We don't need it anymore. Okay, and let's just do a measurement, make sure it fits our slot that we created. I think we're gonna have to elongate our slot just a little bit further. Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, now we want to take the same width that we used on the pliers, and we're going to make another 90-degree bend the opposite direction. On both sides. And there's a template in the instructions, and I already kind of did a dry run using these pliers with that template, so make sure you use it to get your sizing right. Okay, there we go. And let's see if we can't. I'm just gonna insert the wire just to make sure we get free movement. I think I'm gonna have to elongate that just a little bit more. Okay, let's see if we can't run this up from inside. This is going to be a little tricky. In fact, I'm going to use my pliers. Not sure if the camera can get this or not. Okay, there we go. And there it is. Okay, so you can see we've got the wire anchor nicely attached. Now this is why you want to save your cardstock from when you punch out your centering rings and whatnot, because you want to cut out a piece of cardstock to glue on the inside of that tube to keep the wire anchor secured. So I'm going to go get some cardstock and come right back. Okay, I've got a piece of cardstock cut out here, and there's no actual dimensions given, just cut out enough to cover both wires and enough space to give a good solid support. So I'm going to take some wood glue. I'm going to smear it all over the cardstock. Always have a paper towel on hand. Paper towels are the most used yet most underrated item in the workshop. You don't know how badly you need them until you need them, and then you wish you had them. Okay. You want your fingers clean so you don't spread any glue onto the outer surface of the tubes. Okay. We're just going to lay this in position over the wire. Okay, press it down. And I'm going to use a couple clothespins on either side to help hold it down while it dries. Okay, so that wraps that up. So we're just going to let this sit for a little bit and cure. Okay, I just wanted to give you a quick update on the service module. And not only this, but the command module and the launch escape tower also have been primered. In addition to that, I did cut out and glue on the little RCS thrusters. I really, I thought about showing it on camera, but they're so minuscule and so, I don't want to say insignificant, but if you can't figure those out, then you shouldn't be building a Saturn V. But so I did take it out and I primered it in gray. I'm going to let it dry overnight. I'll give it a nice sand down with some fine grit sandpaper, and then I'll hit this with, I haven't decided yet, some sort of metallic, aluminum, silver, something that'll be the right color. And everything else is going to get primered and painted. So this is probably the last time you'll see the rocket without paint on it. Let me get it all painted. I'll come back in and we'll go over the decals. Okay, a lot has changed since just the last segment. As I mentioned, I'm going to paint the rocket and prepare it for decals before I'm able to show it again on camera. Well, in reality, a couple weeks have actually gone by since the last segment, but now we're ready for the decals. All the painting is complete. Let me show you what we got here. This is the upper stage. There's still some structural work to do. For example, this portion still needs to be glued in. We still need to glue the lunar escape system to the top of the service module. Little things like that. But for the most part, structurally, it's pretty much done. Painting is completely done on it. And yeah, so that's the upper stage. Now let me show you the lower stage. It's going to be hard to fit it all here on camera, but let me bring it in from, let's see, probably left or right is the easiest way to do it. So here's the rocket. I'll kind of rotate it. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. There's no such thing as perfect. There is such thing as good enough, and I think I've exceeded good enough. But when I reach good enough, that's usually when I stop, because in the striving for perfection, projects can get ruined. I speak from experience, so I called this one good enough, and like I said, I think we've exceeded that milestone. So I'm going to go ahead and get the decals cut out. I've got them here on the bench. I've got my water ready to go up here. I've got my knife, got some scissors over here. We're going to get these cut out and we're going to start applying the decals. So let me prepare the decals for that and we'll get to it. Okay, we're going to start with the United States decals that are going to go up on the LES and on the service module. And you'll notice, let me bring up two here to show you. There are two different types of decals. The one on the left, as you can see, the United States is curved, and the one on the right, it's straight. So the curved one is actually going to go up on the conical LES, and the straight United States is going to go on the service module. So just keep that in mind as you're cutting these out and applying them. So we're going to start with the LES one, and you'll notice this little tab that's on the left hand side. We're going to angle it so it's on the left while we're looking at this nozzle, and I'm going to drop one of the curved decals in. Okay, we'll give it a few moments to soak. I've got my Q-tips and I've got some paper towel ready to help squeegee out the water. Now we're going to apply this directly above the RCS nozzle, to the right of our tab there. Okay, that may be enough time. Yep. That looks pretty good right out of the gate. Okay. Kind of roll the Q-tip over the decal to push any air and water out from underneath it. Okay, now the other United States decals, they go down and to the right between the RCSs. So we're going to go ahead and drop this one in. Keeps jumping on me. There we go. Now if your decals end up a little bit on this ridge, you can apply some microsol to the decal later and it'll help conform to the underlying features underneath it. But I think we're going to be okay on that one. And also, to let you know, these two units are epoxied into the service module, so that was done off camera. So those are done as well. So just figured it'd be a lot easier to get that glued in first. That'll help us keep our alignment when we apply the decals. Okay, we're going to center that. Just like that. And once again, we're just going to roll and press. Nice. Okay, looking good. Now we're going to rotate this 180 degrees. Do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and drop both in now. I'm going to go ahead and apply those, and we'll come back and start our decals on the lower stage. Okay, we're going to put a few roll patterns on the lower half of the upper stage, if that makes sense. And it's all these black and white checkered pieces here. Now I'm going to start out with the black because we're going to apply that over the white. So we're going to drop one in, and I'll show you how we do one, and then I'll go ahead and do the rest off camera. But a pretty straightforward process. We're going to apply the first one in line with this. If you look at the black stripe that's on the lower half, there's a little pod that sticks out. We're going to go directly above the pod, just below the split where it goes even and flat. So we're going to keep it on the cone just below the transition there. So, and it's going to go with the black checker high and to the right. Okay. Now the ridges will make it a little challenging, but that's okay. Again, if you have any microsol, this will be a perfect opportunity to use it. Okay. Okay, nice. So that's where that's going to be applied. And again, after I fully wrap this, I will go over all these with some microsol to lay them flatter and contour the ridges a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to continue working around the perimeter following the guide and the instructions. Okay, we are getting down to the wire to finish building the Saturn V. Aesthetically, it's done. I've already finished all the painting and the clear coating, and I'll bring the rocket in here after a bit and show that off to you. But for the time being, we've got to work on the recovery system. So we're going to take our two shock cord mounts, and we're going to take two of our shock cords. It comes with three, and they're all of equal length, so you don't have to try to figure out which one is which. So let's just take two of them for now and work on our cardstock trifold shock cord mount. Let's go ahead and get some pre-folds into these to make our life a little easier. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take some wood glue, and I'm going to spread it on 2 and 3 initially. And this is going to get messy, so always have paper towels on standby. So let's just kind of spread that around with our finger. Let's go ahead and hit 1 while we're at it. Okay. Gonna lay this on 2 and 1. We're gonna fold 3 over onto 2. And then I'm gonna spread a little bit of glue on here as well. And we're gonna fold this over onto 1. Just like that. Now the cardstock does not absorb the glue like paper does, so I'm gonna place this under some weight to help keep it flattened down. I'm gonna do the same thing to this shock cord the same way, and then we'll come back when these are dry and install them into the body tubes. Okay, now that the shock cords are dried in their little cardstock mounts, it's time to glue them. In fact, let me get the other one here. Yep, it's time to glue them into the body tube. And again, from this camera angle, it's really hard to see, but I have painted, decaled, and cleared the rocket. We'll get better views of that later, but for now, I'm just going to tilt the rocket on its side so we can insert the shock cords. Now, the key to getting both of these in is you want to have them opposing each other on opposite sides, as well as having them at least 2 inches down from the end of the tube. That way there's plenty of clearance for the shoulder of the upper stage to slide in smoothly. Okay, so let me just put a little curvature in there, spread a little glue on the back. Spread that around. Now keep in mind, the more glue you put on, the longer it's going to take to dry. And we don't necessarily need to goop this up completely. Okay, so we're going to lay it inside the tube. See if I can show you here. About 2 inches down. There you go. Okay, we'll just press that down into place. Okay, we'll prepare the other one. Okay, and again, we're going to put this on the opposite side. So let me rotate this around and lay it right down in the spot there. Okay, so now we've got the 2 shock cord mounts in. We're going to let them sit and dry, but while it's drying, you want to take the 2 ends of your 2 mounts, and we want to tie a knot. It doesn't say exactly how long, but we'll give it about 1 inch. There's 1 knot, and now this is going to be the attachment point for our parachute. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to give this a few minutes to sit and dry inside the tube, and then we're going to actually come back and work on the upper stage. Okay, while the shock cord mounts are drying, I'm going to go ahead and expose now the aramid cord that we had previously installed into the upper stage. There we go. And I'm going to take my third and final shock cord. I'm going to tie a knot and attach it to that cord. We'll do a double knot, just for safekeeping. Okay, I'm going to put just a dab of wood glue on the back side of the knot just to keep it from ever wanting to open up on us. Way too much. There we go. And I'm going to snip off a little bit of this tail. That's still too much glue. There we go. Okay, and off camera I did tie the Kevlar to the snap swivel. And same thing, I'm going to put just a dab of wood glue on the back side of the knot. Press it in. That should keep it from ever wanting to come undone. Okay. Now they call for 13 inches, so I'm going to measure from the knot out to my 13-inch line here. And before you ever cut Kevlar, little trick, dab it with some thin CA glue and just let that wick in. Okay, we'll give it a quick shot of kicker. And then now we can make a nice clean cut with some scissors. And it holds together, it doesn't unravel on you. So there's 13 inches. So you still have quite a bit of extra in case you ever need it sometime. Okay, now we want to take our shock cord and we want to measure down 15 inches. So let me take this down to 15 inches here, and we're going to tie a knot right at this point. Okay, then I'm going to take our aramid cord. I'm going to tie a knot. Tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually tie an extra knot in the rubber shock cord to kind of entrap everything. Okay, and just a little dab of wood glue on there. Okay, now when the time comes, we're going to attach this snap swivel up to this ring up on the capsule, on the service module right there. In fact, let me go ahead and just do a temporary attachment. Okay. Now this is for flight, not for aesthetics. If it's on display, you can simply detach that and shove everything in the tube when you close everything out. Okay, so you can see how now this draws a triangle. So this will come down level under parachute. So we're going to later attach this to our parachute. We're going to run this through the shroud lines and then tie a knot and make it all one unit. Or you can use snap swivels, whatever you... Again, when it comes to parachutes, everyone has their own personal preference. And I'm kind of leery about telling you how to do it one particular way because everyone's going to do it their own way anyway. So, and everyone swears that their way is right, and it is right for them. So no qualms about that. So let me go ahead and wrap all this up. I'm going to have to do something with my cameras so I can do something to show you the final display of the rocket, because at this point it's pretty much done. Just have to attach the parachutes and call it a day. So let me clear the board and we'll finish right up. Okay, so here we have the completed Saturn V. I apologize for the verticalness of the video, but it's really the only way I could get the whole rocket in frame, so we're going to lose our widescreen. But anyway, I had to bring it out to the hallway where I could actually fit everything. But there it is, complete. That's the front side. And you'll see the launch lugs are on that side right there. Down at the base, we've got the fake engines sitting in there. But of course, for flight, you'd remove that and then install your F motor. But there it is in all its glory. Decaled, painted, and cleared. So I'm pretty pleased with it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I apologize, it was a long one, but it is a long build. It's the highest level of difficulty that Saturn or that Estes offers in any of their kits. So it's a project. It's a fun project. Take your time. Enjoy it though. That's the main part. So thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the build. God bless, and we will see you in the next video.